I've been a loner my whole life, not by choice, although I am naturally introverted. But the main reason I've experienced years of social isolation is because I don't really fit in with most people. I never have. I didn't have any friends growing up. I didn't get invited to parties outside of one singular time. And when I did go to that party, I almost got beat up and everyone laughed at me. So that wasn't good. But other than that, I was a loner throughout my school years. I used to just go stand in the bathroom during break period back in high school because I didn't have anyone to sit with. I remember one time in elementary school, this girl in my class invited everybody in the class to her birthday party except for me. I'm sure you can imagine how good that felt. But even after high school, in college, and after college, even up to the current day, I still live in social isolation. And I haven't worked a regular job in years other than a brief month-long stint at a car wash, so that just isolates me even further. I really hardly ever even leave the house at this point, other than to go get groceries. Although the past couple years have probably not been quite as bad since now I live with my mom and my baby cousin. So I take care of my cousin most days. He's almost 2 years old. We're pretty much together all the time. So I'm still isolated from my peers and I'm isolated from broader society, but I do have family. So it's not as bad as it could be. But by the time I was even high school age, I would say the extreme isolation had already done a lot of damage on my mental state. And that's permanent damage, by the way. I don't think I'll ever be able to relate to most people, even as an adult, because of just how isolated I was from my peers during my youth. Most people have certain shared experiences. They can reminisce with each other about trick or treating with friends, or going to the homecoming dance, or what it was like to have their first kiss back in middle school, probably for most people, having sleepovers, things like that. I just don't have those experiences. I never had a sleepover with friends. I never went trick or treating with friends. I just went with my mom. And even back then, I remember being too shy to go knock on anyone's door by myself. My mom had to trick or treat for me while I just stood behind her, too afraid to make eye contact with whoever it is we were asking for candy. But yeah, there's permanent damage, for sure. Now, in my case, my social isolation was kind of my own fault in the sense that I was always just extremely shy. I have cripplingly severe social anxiety, always have. So I was never able to relate to my peers. I always felt like I'm just different and people probably wouldn't like me if I spoke up, so I usually didn't. So with some things, it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation where it's like, am I like this because of the years of isolation? Or is it because I'm like this that I ended up being so isolated from my peers? I can't always answer that question for every problem I have, but what I can tell you about living your whole life like I have with very little socialization, it's definitely very difficult. I always feel like I'm missing out on something. And I know I already have missed out on most normal developmental milestones that most people experience growing up. Like, I never had my first kiss till I was in my 30s, and I hardly even count that. I never had a real romantic relationship. The closest I ever came was just, I don't know, about a year ago, or probably not even that long ago, but she was just using me. Probably just wanted a green card. I don't really know. I don't care. And even that, I think if I had had a normal upbringing with a normal amount of socialization and normal relationships growing up, if I had experienced all that, then I probably wouldn't have been so desperate now that I fall victim to the first cruel woman that tries to trick me into some dead bedroom green card arrangement. But that's part of what social isolation does to a man. it makes you vulnerable to being taken advantage of because you don't have the experience to be able to tell when someone's just using you. And even if you can tell, then you might just be desperate enough to risk it. I sent a woman chicken wings and a Sprite through DoorDash, and she ghosted me. And yes, that was a large Sprite, by the way. But that's just how desperate I am. I'm not going to fall for that one again, obviously. That was stupid. I mean, no matter how unfortunate my life situation has been, that was stupid either way, so that's on me. But let's say they developed a pill that could instantly cure my social anxiety. And let's say there's no side effects. Because I know there are some medications out there that might be pretty effective, but I'm not going to risk becoming addicted to something that might actually be bad for me in the long run. But let's say I was able to just 100% cure my social anxiety. Well, that would be good, but I would still struggle tremendously in my social life because I'm so under-socialized. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't think I could maintain a relationship even if I was super extroverted. Inhibition is not the only problem here. I'm under-socialized. I can't relate to people. People can't relate to me. And I don't have the experience to even know what I'm supposed to say or what I'm supposed to do in certain situations. In most situations. And masking can only take you so far. That might get you through work or going out running errands or whatever, but you can't mask all the time with your actual friends. You can't pretend to be someone you're not with your significant other. I mean, I guess you can maybe. People do it, but I don't think that's a situation I'd want to be in. Obviously, I'd love to have a woman that I could be myself around and she would love me for who I am. But I don't see that happening. And I really don't mean to be throwing myself a pity party here. I'm just trying to keep it real. I know some of y'all probably know what I'm talking about. Some of y'all probably have it worse than I do. This is just the reality of the situation. If you never form close relationships in your youth and you miss out on all the milestones and all the shared experiences that most people all have, then there's no way to catch up. You're just going to be emotionally and socially stunted. And I am. I am emotionally stunted in every way. I'm really immature for my age. I don't know if that shows through my videos. It probably does. But my sense of humor is still stuck in middle school. I always catch myself having thoughts or just getting these unrealistic ideas. Like, for example, the other day I started thinking about opening a business, like a brick and mortar business, which I know that's not an immature idea in the typical sense, but it doesn't make sense for me when I have no startup capital and I can't even hold eye contact with people most of the time. I can't even form sentences around people a lot of the time. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But I just daydreamed about it for way too long, and I even opened up Obsidian and started writing out notes for it. It reminded me of back when I was like 12, when I had the idea of starting my own country, and I wrote out a constitution, I started writing out laws, I think I wrote a Bill of Rights, and I designed a flag. Like, it's just a childish dream. And I'm not against going for your dreams. In fact, I encourage it. But there has to be some element of realism. It's got to at least be based in reality. So that's one effect I think all the years of isolation have had on me. I'm just too prone to fantasy. And I really am stunted. I'm stuck in an adolescent mentality. I still find myself way too often fantasizing about singing at the school talent show, and I do a great job. I blow everyone away. Everyone's amazed with my talent, and I end up becoming popular because of it. I think most people probably leave the old talent show fantasy behind them by the time they're 37 years old, you know, or at least most people don't have that fantasy every time they listen to music. because that's how it is for me. Anytime I listen to a song I really like, I just start fantasizing about performing at the talent show, which is extra stupid because I remember my high school talent shows. And I remember when some unpopular fat guy absolutely shredded on guitar, and people did have to admit he was really good, but nobody really cared. He didn't suddenly become popular from it. Meanwhile, some jock from the football team played drums in a band with some other popular guys, and they weren't horrible, I guess. They were okay, but they weren't great. I mean, they really weren't that. They were about as good as you expect a band of high schoolers to be. But I remember all the girls just going crazy for these guys, especially the drummer, because they were already popular. That's how the talent show actually was in reality. But I still have that fantasy all the time. Like, I'm 37 years old. I'm probably older now than most of my teachers were. It makes absolutely no sense for me to still be fantasizing about doing something that far in the past. But that's how stunted I am. I'm still stuck in high school, unable to move past it because I didn't get to have all the normal milestone experiences that everyone else had. Now, I will say, if there is a silver lining to this, I do think that the years of extreme isolation have kind of forced me to learn to be able to entertain myself without depending on anyone else. It would still be better, obviously, to have the option to go out and spend time with friends every now and then, or just hang out with a girlfriend or something. But I do think, because I've always been alone most of the time, I had to learn to cope by learning how to keep myself entertained. I do get bored a lot of times, but I can also have a pretty decent Saturday night just watching YouTube videos or browsing forums. Or browsing forums is what I used to do. Forums are pretty much dead these days. Reddit is not the same thing, but either way, all I'm saying, I can have a pretty good time by myself just playing video games or something. Now, you might say I'm just coping, and you are correct. I literally am just coping, but I think a lot of normal people that are properly socialized actually don't know what to do if they have to be alone on a Saturday night. They literally don't know how to cope. So you can say this is cope, but I think knowing how to cope is a skill, and I am very skilled at coping because I have had plenty of time to do that, let me tell you. I also think I probably have a better sense of self-awareness than most people due to my isolation. This also stems from coping, I guess, because part of it is I ended up trying to cope by getting into philosophy. So I've read a lot of Plato, I've read some books on Stoicism, only the classics, only the source material for me, such as Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. But I do think it's all the years of isolation that made me want to seek out these more formal examinations of the human experience. Ultimately, yeah, all of this is just me trying to cope in increasingly more sophisticated ways, but I think there is some value in that. I think being isolated and not having any friends to hang out with helped me develop more of an intellectual curiosity than I would have had otherwise. Even if that's only because I had to find new ways to cope. And who knows, if I hadn't been so socially isolated, I might not have been able to buckle down and focus on studying as much as I had to do to get my useless degrees, which ultimately I don't think I'm retaining much of what I learned, and a lot of it just isn't that useful anyways. But I did get 2 STEM degrees. I have a master's degree in computer science, and yeah, it's useless. It's not helping me get a job. In fact, being properly socialized and having connections with people would definitely be far more useful in helping me get a job. But I still think there was some value in just practicing the act of sitting down and focusing on one thing for a long period of time and focusing so heavily and taking exams and making good grades, at least I was exercising my mind and practicing focus, which I don't know, maybe it is all useless, but maybe not. Maybe it'll take me like an extra year or two before I get Alzheimer's, since I practiced using my brain so much. But that's really about it for the positive results of my isolation. I'm a little better at coping than the average person. I'm better at entertaining myself, which really doesn't even matter because if you think about it, if I had a normal social life, then I wouldn't need to entertain myself. So that's kind of a wash, I guess. Obviously, experiencing social isolation for most of your life is pretty much just all bad. There's a lot of negative effects. I've already talked about how I'm emotionally stunted, I'm immature, I have no social skills to speak of, and no confidence. But aside from that, it's just depressing. Human connection is a human need. There's a reason that there is a social meter in The Sims. It is a need. Knowing that you have people that care about you, people that will help you out if you're in a jam, that is necessary for a person to be emotionally regular. Now, I actually don't have it as bad as you might think because I do have a pretty good relationship with both of my parents. And now I have my baby cousin too. So that definitely counts for something. But still, being loved by your parents doesn't really give you the same emotional security as being loved by friends or by a romantic partner. Because parental love is unearned. They love me because they birthed me. And I'm not taking that for granted. I know a lot of people don't have parents that love them, so I do appreciate what I have, but it's still not something I earned. It doesn't do much to make me feel like I'm deserving of love. It just seems like it's automatic, or like they have to love me out of obligation. It's not like where if I had friends or a girlfriend that loved me, that would contribute more to my emotional well being because that would feel more like a connection I have because I earned it. That would make me feel more deserving. And honestly, I feel pretty certain at this point that I'm not deserving of love. I feel like I don't deserve to have close human connections most of the time. I feel pretty confident about that. Whether or not it's true, because just think, I've been alone my entire life. It's not like I'm just now in a phase where I'm socially isolated. I've been experiencing extreme isolation my entire life. And it's not because I'm in monk mode or anything like that. It's just because my entire life, people don't seem to want to be around me. Or, I mean, it is that, but there's also an element to it where it feels like it's my fault I'm isolated because I'm too afraid to try to make connections. I'm afraid to take risks. And those two things feed off each other. I feel like people just don't like me in general, which makes me feel like I'm just not a likable person. So that makes me have more anxiety around socializing. But because of my social anxiety, it makes it harder for me to approach people or speak up in a group setting. And anytime I do have a rare moment when I actually speak up, I'm so awkward because of my anxiety and my constant overanalyzing of every little thing, it usually doesn't go very well. So that contributes further to making me feel like I'm just an unlikable loser that doesn't deserve to have friends. So it's kind of like an Ouroboros of misery. It's a self-feedback loop that just feeds on itself and keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's hard to get away from that. It's hard to stop feeling anxious. It's hard to feel like I deserve to not be alone. And it's hard to not feel like shit most of the time, if I'm being honest. Even though I know in the grand scheme of things, my life isn't actually that bad. I do have family that care about me. I live in a wealthy nation, in a house, I'm not homeless. But still, when you are isolated for so long, like I have been, it takes a toll on you. One other effect of my social isolation is I think I'm actually getting dumber. I think my IQ is probably decreasing by at least a point every year, and it has been for probably a few years now, if not longer. I think when I was still in school, that helped keep my brain fresh, but since then, it's really going downhill. I think I used to be fairly intelligent, but I really don't think that's the case anymore. And I know it's natural for IQ to decrease a bit with age, but I think part of it is also due to the isolation. Because I'm so depressed sometimes, I end up just consuming slop all day, not exercising my mind as much as you should, just sitting in my room, rotting, consuming slop, and I'm getting dumber, I think. It feels like that, anyways. Also, I sometimes catch myself not having as much sympathy for others as I should have, especially at times when I'm the most isolated. Like, I'll hear about something horrible happening to someone and I'll just not care. I just won't. Then later on, I think about it again and I'll think, wait a second, that's messed up. Something horrible might happen to me someday, and I sure as hell hope people would care. One example I remember, this was years ago, but there was a video I came across where a guy was trying to do pull ups hanging off the side of a skyscraper. Or I don't know if it was a skyscraper, but it was, he was very high up on this building. It was at least like 10, 20 floors, something like that. I'm sure you've all heard of this kind of thing. It's just a very extreme thrill seeking activity that some people do. And I remember seeing this clip, and the guy fell, and the story with the video said he didn't make it, obviously. And I just remember thinking, the initial thought that popped in my head was, serves him right. That's what I thought when I first saw it. But then later, I was thinking about it again, and it's like, that's a really fucked up attitude to have. Obviously, nobody should be trying to do pull ups off the side of a building, but at the same time, it's not good that he didn't make it. That guy had a family, I'm sure. There was probably at least someone in this world that was heavily impacted by what happened. And yeah, the guy surely had some serious issues to be doing something like that in the first place, but that doesn't mean anyone should make light of what happened to him. It's still a tragedy. So, luckily, I do catch myself a lot of times when I think like that, but I always find that happening more when I'm at my most isolated. And I don't know if that's because my brain is just trying to cope with my own situation by defaulting to some misguided sense of superiority or what. I don't know what it is, but that is not a good way to think. That's just not a good way to be. So that's one thing that the years of isolation have done to me. I think I've covered all the biggest effects social isolation can have on a man. If any of you listening to this have experienced social isolation like I have, or you've experienced it worse than I have, let me know in the comments if there's any effects you've noticed that I didn't mention. And good luck, by the way, if you are experiencing this. I sincerely mean that. I know it's not easy. As always, I want to say thank you for watching. Knowing I have people out there that actually want to listen to what I have to say really does make it a little bit better. So I appreciate it. If you're new here, please check out some of my other videos. There's some secret videos you can watch for free on my Patreon. No sign up required. And I'll see you next time.